Hello, rememberers and reenchanters. I hope that you enjoyed listening to this podcast episode as much as I enjoyed making it. I just wanted to take a quick moment here to invite you to go further into your own journey of remembering and reenchanting with us. There's so many ways that can happen. One of the most popular ones is to join our newsletter, where you get stories, ideas, analysis, and opportunities to join our other offerings. Speaking of other offerings, our next super cool offering is our Circular Time course, which invites people at the year turning, the end of the year in December and January, to take a one-off it's like basically a workshop with us where you get to go deeper into circular time. You get to create your own circular time calendar and really see some of the wonders of connecting your ecology, your own life experience, what's going on for you in this past solar cycle, this past year, and the deeper ways in which life is moving you. It's a really special and much beloved offering, a reflection offering. And you can sign up on our website. The details will all be in the chat below in the show notes. It'd be really great to see you at those. They're very easy to join and easy to participate in. It's really just committing to doing some of the work that you probably want to do at the end of the year anyway. So this is a great time to do that. And you can always reach out to me. I always like hearing from people, hearing what people are up to, what kinds of questions that you are asking and exploring and engaging in. Thanks so much. Enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome to the Remembering and Reenchanting podcast. My name is Sara Jolena Wolcott, and I am your hostess on this sacred learning journey of unraveling, unveiling, and becoming more fully alive at the end of the world as we know it. In this podcast, we offer up to you, dear listener, 3 forms of episodes to support your journey of remembering and reenchanting. First, conversations with amazing people. Second, storytelling. And third, myth casting. In this episode, we're going to bring you a conversation between myself and another amazing, fascinating leader in the areas of remembering and reenchanting. Hello and welcome to the Remembering and Reenchanting podcast. My name is Sara Jolena Wolcott, and I am so delighted to have with me in the studio Meda DeWitt. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And we met at the Indigenous Economics Futures Conference in San Francisco not that long ago. And I said, it'd be really cool to have you on my podcast, even though I actually knew nothing about you.
Just randomly asked me in a parking lot.
Yeah. Because you just have such beautiful, joyous, loving energy that's encompassing everyone around you. And I'm just oh, you're just cool. I don't know who you are, but you're really cool. And then I got to learn more about you, and I feel affirmed about my initial intuition. You come as a traditional healer and an artist, and so many that, of course, as a mother, and it's manifesting in so many different ways your beingness in the world. And I'm just, would love if there's a particular introduction that you would like to give of yourself as we begin this conversation together.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I am Lingit from Southeast Alaska, and we do have protocols around our traditional introductions, especially with people that we do not know. So, Dleet ka klenach Meda DeWitt yucha duasak, Lingit klenach Zeitzinak yucha duasak, Lingit klenach ka duklaat yucha duasak, Lingit klenach Janmutla yucha duasak. Aniaina chatsati kacharieri kachati stakin kwan ayachat. Um, Forgive me if I made any mistakes. It was not my intention. Uh, but I'm still a learner. What I said was my English name is Meda DeWitt. My Tlingit names are Tsetsunak, Katuklaat, and Junmutla. You get different names as you advance in age, and also responsibility sometimes in your tribal group. And so John Whitlaw is my newest one, just from the summer. I've officially like anti-age in my clan, and so it translates to Mother of the Mountain Goats. And for us, the mountain goat represents the spirits of the mountain. It's like they are the manifestation of the physical representation of the mountain, of that spirit and movement. So, my adopted Nipek name is Tigigalook. My adopted Northern Cree name is Boss Eagle Spirit Woman, and my friends somehow it just turned into Boss or Bossy. And I come by it honestly. Some people are like, oh, don't say that. Bossy is a pejorative term. I'm like, oh no, I earned that. And I use it proudly. Um, Yeah, so I'm on Denina Ethnena in Anchorage, Alaska with my fiance, and he has 4 kids and I have 4 kids. We have 8 total. 5 are still at home, 3 are adulting. My families come from Wrangell or Stuckingquan and Yakutat, as well as all over the Northwest Coast. So I'm also related to Taltan and Haida and Atna. And many of you know Southeast and know that one tribal house that has the bear on the front that's like on all the postcards. That's literally my tribal house. That's the Hut Hut. That's the Mud Shark house, and it's the lead house for the Nanyai.
I remember when we were in that parking lot on Ohlone land and what's now San Francisco, and near the bay, and you asked me, "Oh, what's your podcast about?" And I said, "Oh, it's about time." And then I realized after I said I don't actually say that all the time. I don't actually tell people that that's what it's all about. So I appreciate the lineages that enable you to ask questions to people that inspire truthful responses, like the responses that are beneath the surface. And I recognize that in you, and I also recognize that in all the names and places that you spoke of and brought into this beginning. Um, that that listening for both the names and the things underneath the names.
I think it's a very interesting language, and this ties in with time because I'm sure you know by now that your language that you learn actually changes your brain patterns and the way that you perceive time and physical reality.
Oh.
And that's an important tie-in. In Tlingit, our time isn't linear. It's circular. It has patterns, has rhythms, and we have these concepts like ha kusti, which roughly translates to like our way of life or doing the things that Tlingits do. But all of our words and the ways that we think is story form or poetic, right? So there's like layered meanings and stories that also go with them. There's not just the direct translation. So we also have this idea of like when you're doing the things that your ancestors are doing at the same time and seasonality in the same way, then you are with them in that time and space presently. You're existing together in that time and space. And so, it's like thinking of like almost like when you look at 2 mirrors and you've got like multiples of yourself, right? So you have like all these generations before and after you that are existing in that same time and space of being Tlingit.
Mm. I was thinking, like, even how do we even begin to talk about time across culture in the sense that, as you're saying, like, it's so much of it's in the language and so much of it's in these bigger cosmovisions, which are not just small words, they're big, big stories. And what you're saying reminds me of, I was speaking with a client today and saying, pushing her on like trying to define values, because it's like, these small words that we associate with values if we try to narrow the word down too much, we miss the bigger poetic story behind it. And it's very easy to become confused about what people mean when they use a word, even a beautiful word like responsibility or reciprocity. It's like, what does that mean if you don't have like 10 stories to go with it?
Right.
And like the layered and layers and layers of context to even to begin to think about what words mean. They're not words. Words are not divorced from the story around them.
Well, yeah, because you have to create context, right? Because you and I, we have the same English language that we've learned, but we've learned it in very different times and spaces. And so we may have like a dictionary definition that is applicable to everybody, but then there's also the context and perception that you learn the word in or place around the way that you use the word. And that does take time to build that kind of relationship and understanding between groups.
So when you're thinking about what are the categories you like to be in with? Like,
Well, Sarah,
yeah.
how long do we have? Let's start. You want to talk about time? Let's start there. How long do we have?
Yeah, like, another 45 minutes or so. A few lifetimes.
Yeah.
1 or 2 generations.
Yeah, I don't know. We can just talk story. I mean, like, everything starts with good questions. So you are the placeholder for your listenership, and I'm here as a guest. So what kind of questions do you think that you or your listeners have?
Right. Like, how do we begin? So if folks are some folks coming from Indigenous cultures, some folks not coming from Indigenous cultures, how can we begin to think about some of the ways of thinking about time in your culture?
Yeah. So I think that we already kind of started on that. So we have the experience in the Western colonial structures of time being very managed, right? We have the Gregorian calendar, and we have, this time set across the globe. That's Greenwich Mean Time. And it's all very calculated in the terms to create successful communication for commerce and exchange. I mean, that's the purpose of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that people forget that their time exists outside of the way that we manage it. And, depending on what culture you're in, time, there is no past or present. Past or future, there's only present. There's some people that view it that way. For us, time is very different because our stories are old. We retain stories from before the Great Floods, and the Great Floods were only like 8,000 to 10,000 years ago. We were already in place in a fully functional society by the time that happened. They can find fish weirs easily to 14,000 years. There's jawbones of moose in caves that were hunted and processed 24,000 years ago, right? So I say 20,000 years because our time and our stories is measured in geological time, which there's not a lot of, I think, cultural groups who do that or can't or have done that. And, we in the Western society, we learn about time and geology, but, they always kind of reference humans being very, very new to the scene. And I guess in our modern form, that's correct. But, for some people, like the Inuit people, some of my mentors, they talk about being up in their regions for hundreds of thousands of years. They have stories and remember from before they were humans like they are now.
Mm.
And so that still exists, that knowledge, spirituality, connection with Mother Earth, wisdom, it still exists across the globe. And so there's usually story keepers. So that way, genealogy and history are living.
Mm-hmm.
And so traditionally, we would actually find people who were on this, like what now we call it on the spectrum, right?
Mm.
But if you really start studying humans, all humans are a little bit on the spectrum somewhere.
Mm.
But we looked for people with the gift of that very intense memory and categorization. And so they would learn from their mentors and predecessors how to tell story without them putting in any of their own emotion. You would learn the emotion from the teacher. You would learn the inflection from the teacher. You would learn the cadence and the timing and the body language and everything from the teacher. And so that's why, like, it's so special when you have somebody with this mega memory, but also, doesn't express or read emotion in the same way that other people do. They have to study it, right? So then all those micro nuances are very apparent to somebody like that, who's learning how to be that way, or learn how to be in that story. And so that's what we did, is we kept these stories alive by finding different types of humans with gifts and people, elders looked for community members. Basically they even watched, in utero, what was their pregnancy like? What was their gestation like? What was their birth like? What was their infancy like? Who do they remind them of? What does their childhood look like? What are they drawn to? And so very intentionally observed natural propensity and then reinforced that by supporting them and teaching them in learning those things and pairing it with the right kinds of mentors and education. So continuity of culture through oral history is something that it's not like laissez-faire happenstance, like some people think of story. It's very much a sacred duty, high, huge responsibility, and very respected for those who can do that.
Yeah.
So this relationship with time, like I said earlier, it's not linear. It is circular, and not just circular, because you'll see like the medicine wheels from Lower 48 where they're like, this is spring, summer, and fall. And it's still on like this 2-dimensional medicine wheel, not to throw shade on anybody, but just that's a way that they can explain that's simple for other people whose minds might not have the reinforced neural connections to understand 3-dimensional yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you think of that as these seasons, birth, childhood, maturation, elderhood, death, but then you layer them on top of each other. So you're going up like a spiral.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so then you have these, not only do you have this maturation and growth in seasons as you're going around the year, but as the years stack up, you also go through maturation and seasons as well.
Okay.
And it's considered that while we're here in this physical reality, it's a school. We're learning how to become real human beings. We're learning to have empathy and connection and knowledge and wisdom, and creating that context of what it is to live in this physical reality before we go and we're preparing to go to the next world. So it's very much a rites of passage. And, in our cultural view, people do come back. And there's a couple of ways to explain that. One is literally their reincarnation, the spirit coming back. But then we also have blood memory knowledge. So you may not be the same spirit as the other person, but you have their blood memory in your DNA. And if you want to bring in like some of the insights and knowledge from that person, then, and you have the propensity for being attracted for this type of work, then they'll give you a name of your ancestor to help. It almost like engages the DNA and the blood memory and bring it alive in that person so that they can learn from it. But that same mechanism works. We hear about historical trauma and epigenetics, and this trauma being passed down through people. We knew that. And that's why we had very strict rules on how to behave, how to treat each other, and trauma informed ways of being. So that way we didn't cause that blood memory to then keep coming up over and over and over and over with these historical traumas or the traumatic impacts. So it stays alive in people's DNA as it's activated and they're experiencing new harm. So you can reinforce people experiencing positive and growth, and you can reinforce people experiencing negativity and pain.
I'm hearing there like many different cycles, right? Like the cycles of intergenerational cycles of trauma and healing. I don't so looking for a bigger word than that, but multiple things being passed down through generations, as well as the cycle of people's life, as well as like the cycle within from one life to another life. The cycles of the seasons that are connected to these different geographies. And all of those different cycles being present in any given moment. And like kind of like loosening from the linearity and moving into that present moment and like recognizing the past and the future both in the present moment. And you live in the ecosystem, the geographies where you are has such a strong light dark. Your year is so influenced by the light time and the dark time. Like how does that influence these other cycles?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, I'll send you a link. It's for sanctuary animism. And there's our logo actually came from the Good Medicine exhibit that I curated for the Anchorage Museum. I worked with Unungan artist Dustin Newman, who's also a good friend and one of my Padawans for plant medicine. We worked together to create an Alaskan medicine wheel because our experience of time and light are very different than other places. And so we have more of this balance where, like it's so timely to have this conversation because we're almost to winter solstice, right? It's going to be the shortest day of the year. So it's 2:30 and the sun is just about to start going under the horizon for me.
What time is it rise where you are?
Yeah, it's getting, it's light and like daylight by like 10 o'clock. So we're only having about 4 hours of true day, and the rest of it, because the sun is traveling sideways, as it's also dipping. So we have like a few hours at, twilight before and after. And so it's very much a different experience with light and circadian rhythms. Because we go into, kind of into this hibernation in the winter, but it's also healing and restorative and dreaming, and it's a valuable thing. And when we come up to solstice, traditionally that's our storytelling season. So we would go into the dark, because pre-contact, we didn't have fake light, the blue light, it was firelight. And, you'd spend some time outside, but you'd go into story time and you'd be in, these homes or cabins with firelight and a storyteller. And when you're in the dark, you start creating different kinds of chemicals in your brain. And some of those chemicals help you to have a more vivid imagination, to vision. And So, you can learn more about what that is by reading up on like darkroom technology and for visioning. But we tell the sacred stories at these times, and with people's brains being more open, more plastic, because of the chemicals that are being released, then you tell the group stories together, and people are spending time in close quarters, and you're singing together, dancing together. Then you're creating a stronger social cohesion and group identity, with whomever's in that, participating in that. So our um our medicine wheel that we came up with in the middle has the eye of awareness, which is a concept that we share, like this consciousness. We all have higher powers that, we all agree that there's creator and higher power. But the eye of awareness specifically is a Yupik term, and my mentor, Dr. Gremarita, who is one of the 13 international Circle Council of Grandmothers, that was the symbol that she would use for Samua, right? That consciousness or eye of awareness. But it's form line. So my children's great uncle on their dad's side actually made that symbol for Gremarita. And so we put that in there for that eye of awareness. And then we have the balance between the light and the dark, right? With a kind of a strip in between, for that twilight or in between space, liminal space between seasons. So yeah, people can go and check it out, and there's more description of what it is on that website. But in the summer, also it's the opposite. We have at summer solstice almost complete 100% light, 24 hours of light. And so one of the projects that I work on is for the Wilderness Society. That's my day job. I'm Alaska State senior manager, and I have a program called the Imago program. And I'll send you a link for that too. But we take people up into the Arctic refuge, and I detox people from time. I detox people from blue light, from standard American diet, right? All of these things. I detox them from agendas, and help their nervous system to reset. And so one of the things that is so beneficial up there is because the sun is just going in a circle around, these mountains. And so you'll have a day where you'll kind of know what time of day it is because it's around the top, but there's no like set nighttime or set morning time. It's always like light, so it's pretty great. And people who are really like OCD and addicted to time and agendas, oh man, that's so hard for them. They kind of wig out at first, because I have an agenda. You have to for grant purposes, but then when we get out there, we operate on native time on purpose. And so this idea of native time is, people say that again pejoratively to say that people are just always late. You also hear it for like island time. But what is not communicated is actually native time has a intelligence to it. It is doing the right things at the right time. Well, right. The priority isn't being on time to a place. The priority is, for us, at least in the Arctic Refuge, right? Like, what is the weather doing? What is Mother Nature doing? Am I going to force everybody to be in an 8-hour, closed door session when you've got 1,000 caribou running past, bears and wolves and rainstorms and fog and rivers and sunshine and rainbows and windstorms and all these beautiful things happening all the time. So bringing Mother Nature into this experience as a participant, as a facilitator, as a being, and learning how to listen. Also native time, what's more important? You're, picking up your children and making sure they're fed, or, like sometimes you have to juggle and try to get them both to work, but the priority is family or other things versus being there specifically on the dot. So there's a wisdom to native time that is not explained very well or often.
Well, it's everything you're saying is prioritizing life. and like the needs of life and the needs of, and that's in the weather, that's in the caribou, that's in the being with children and elder.
Yeah, so that's it.
With time.
Yeah, and that's an organic experience of time versus the managed experience of time.
Mm-hmm, the mechanical, yeah. We talk a lot about clock time versus earth time, of how moving out of clock time and being able to go in between the two, and like being able to even first to just notice which one's which, but to be able to like say, okay, when are we going to move into this? What does this thing actually require too? What does a conversation actually need? Might be shorter or longer than its allocated time. And so then, I mean, there's a question of how does one go in between those things? But like, do you, I imagine that living in that kind of space most of the time, if one can live in that kind of space most of the time, that there is an energy that emerges from it, from that kind of organic way of being with these different natural cycles, so that one might experience a greater level of energy than rather, because so often I find that people, when they're on the clock time, they get really, really drained. And some of it is that like forcing themselves around the precision of a managed schedule or something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm imagining that there's more energy can flow within and through communities in a different way. Do you think that's
Yeah, I do think it's true. And I am, because what's happening is you have that organic time that is in alignment with natural law and the rhythms of the season and the animals and the people and the plants and the birds and everything is in unison. And if you're on the managed time, then you are out of sync with Mother Nature and everything around you, right? There's a disconnect. So once you drop into that organic time, natural, that's in alignment with natural law and nature and ecosystems, then your body starts to become nourished in a way that it didn't have before, right? Like your sleep is going to be different. The times of sleep, how you sleep, when, the activities you're going to do and getting out on the land are going to be different. The kinds of foods that you'll be eating will be different, right? The interactions and communication that you'll be having will be different. And then your body's going to start recognizing it as a natural way of being, which then helps to lower cortisol and adrenaline. And once you get out of that anxiety, because adrenaline will literally shift the way that you perceive time. So if you can get out of an anxiety and fear, around time and punctuality, to just be and just exist, then you're going to reduce those stress hormones and your body's going to start to heal.
When you say that, I feel the incredible importance of moving out of managed time on so many levels. And like, are there ways that you're finding to support the community and moving away from managed time structures?
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, taking people out on the land for these dialogues, there's people who never even realized that what they were like, the structure that they were in versus what does it look like to not be in it.
Right.
Right. So for some folks, it can be fairly life transformative to have a time detox. And I think that we'll probably see more and more of that. I'm sure that somebody's going to pick up on that industry and have these retreats and places where you can go and just be and heal. You'll see that a lot traditionally, right? With like monasteries and monks and people going and spending time with them out of time.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest in the history of, certainly in the history of the church, has been creating their own temporal cycle. Was one of their biggest forms of creating their own society.
Yeah.
In the history of the monasteries, it's been one of the biggest And even the structure of the calendar year came out of the monastic capacity to think about how the story of Jesus and the cycle of the year, how they connected. So kind of connecting story and temporal cycles. And like that, and they interrupted their nighttime for prayer, right? Again, they would there was that midnight mass. There was that notion of like you sleep and then you wake up and then you sleep again. But the creation of a cycle of prayer, or a cycle of living that was different than what people around them were doing, than what your everyday person was doing, was a really big part of how they thought about these things. But most, so I guess, but as we've moved into a more managed time society, as you say, and so you take people out on the land, and then like when they come back into when they come off the land and when they go back, I imagine it must be quite a shock, or quite jarring to go back into the managed time. And like, are they able to find ways of bringing that non-managed time, or bringing that earth time and that nature time back into their life?
I mean, it's different for every person, but yeah, there's people who then make it a priority to create that space for themselves, right, as their ongoing self-care and wellness plan. It also creates empathy around working with Indigenous groups or Alaskan groups, and the way that we experience time and priorities in life. So it's definitely something that people are aware of, they take with them, and they bring it into the temporal institutions in their own life in the ways that they can.
It's certainly an increasingly climate changed world. I hope that there's a greater awareness of the damage that our current the managed time does to both to nature and to humans, and the overemphasis on production. A greater awareness of the damage, the tremendous damage that does, and a return to a different way of engaging with time, to living in time.
Oh yeah, we're entering into a huge reckoning of time. I mean, if you look at like some of the things that we're dealing with, we're in a capitalistic system that is based off of production, labor and labor, right? And it's either the physical labor and toil or labor and reproduction. And we have the system of exchange, like you have X amount of effort and X amount of time versus X amount of dollars. But we're also now entering into an era of technology that makes all of that irrelevant, because we'll have, the ways and means to create of, labor and toil, and then reproduction, and creation of skilled trades and goods and services and food, right? Like all of those had assigned values in a capitalistic system, and they're not going to make sense anymore. I mean, we even just like the creation of our billionaires, we have, because their value of what they do per hour does not equal that much money. Right. But it's them being able to manage other people's time and effort to capitalize on it, to then bring it to them. And so we have, some people think of this in negative terms in the past, but humans, if you take all that negativity away, humans like to be productive. We like doing things, right? And so we're going to see this shift in, what does it take as in a currency of exchange to keep our system running, that's no longer valued on your time unit of effort. And so we're going to have a lot of illusions that are going to be deconstructed, that we're going to have to collectively reconstruct in a way that is conducive to life and living and, repairing Mother Earth.
Well, hopefully I can see the demand for your.
It takes a lot. It's a logistical, magical thing that takes a lot of my time to get done. Yeah.
I'm sure.
But it's funny in production because I have been kind of atypical in the way that I work even before COVID. So I was teaching with the university via Zoom before COVID, contracting and working from home. And it was interesting because there's a lot of people who are like, how do you do so much? How do you create so much? Because I'm kind of prolific in production of content in different ways, and whether it's classes or, teaching or books or whatever. And I feel like I'm actually quite lazy. Because, I'm not clocking in at 8 and then clocking out at 5, but I work a lot, but also I have ebbs and flows. I have some days where I'm very productive. I have some days where I'm not very productive. I have some periods of time during the days where I'll produce a lot and finish, but I've also allowed myself that ability to work differently and create differently, which in my career was not very good for your bill cycle. But now I've been doing it for so long that I make enough money and have enough value assigned to what I create that's devoid of how many hours I put in it.
Okay.
Now I do have a day job, right? That I have hours that I work, but salaried as well. So I might spend some of that time on Saturday working, or I might be spending some of that time after dinner working, or I might be spending some of that time at some other interval or working through lunches, right? But then also picking up and dropping off kids and just living at a different rhythm and pace. And so then it looks like a higher yield in production.
Well, I'm hearing the organicness in it, right? Like finding a way to be organic within within a very modern context, right? Like what is organic? I think sometimes we think of creating organic structures as like completely only being like out in nature, right? But then there's like, well, in our daily life, there is all these different demands and there are these different calendar systems and there is all these different things we have to be engaging with right now. But there are ways of doing that are we can still come from a different place in how we engage with it.
Yeah.
We can still like it can still arise from and being able to work with time organically is such a big part of that. I can't imagine now, like, I mean, I've been doing my own thing for a while now and for many years, and it took a long time to learn how to do that in a way that created things. By creating, I mean, creating things that other people could engage with, not just things that I could see on my computer, but that other people could also see. That took a while to figure out how to do that creative to go beyond myself. But that took a fair amount of time to figure out how to do that. But once I figured out how to like get to have that creativity go out, not just like here, I create a lot, kind of like what you're talking about. There's a lot of creativity and there's a lot of things to get out there. And I also feel like I have so much more that I can see than I can actually create. So I always feel like there's a little bit of a backlog.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I always have like, oh yeah, those things are still not finished.
Well, you're an infinite being having a physical experience.
Yeah, apparently there's physicality within all this time stuff. There's a sense of an infinite time and yet time is also very not. It's infinite and not infinite. It's both. Right. Yeah. So, but it is a different way of living. It is a different way of living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we are only supposed to be here for a certain amount of time. So how do you spend that? And And I was kind of cracking up because when you were talking about after I said infinite being and you played that back, I was like, oh God, creator had like planned obsolescence. Right? Like, because then you create, then that makes, there's a value to the being here. There's a value to your time. If we just existed here forever without our eventual mortality, then we wouldn't value the being here in the ways that we do. And, you know, that's one of the biggest things that Western constructs have a fear of death and mortality, you know, and I think that we need to embrace that this time is short. This time is precious. This time is our time to manage, right? Our efforts are ours to manage. And how do we express those in the values that we want in the world?
And I'm curious, like, is there a sense of death and darkness or death and winter going together? Are those two like linked at all?
Well, I mean, of course, you know, and you go over to Northern Europe and the pagans and, you know, like there's the death and resurrection that some people, you know, suspect that Jesus's pattern and his death and resurrection was based off of that original story over there. For us, it's not necessarily death as an immortality death. It's a time for sleep and hibernation. It's a time to rest. You know, we're inside and we're more and weaving and cooking and talking and spending that time with each other. So it's a different rhythm. It's not death. It's
That's so, yeah, that's so interesting. Like, so it just sparked something for me because so much of European, even folklore, like non-Christian folklore around winter is connected to death.
Yeah.
Which is very different than connected to like dream time and slowing down and rejuvenation. Or it's like, it's a very clear, like winter is like early medieval literature, is like poetry, especially winter, sickness and death are really linked.
Right.
And it's like very strong and versus like seed sorting or resting or like making things like crafting, storytelling, or just like a different rhythm.
Right. And so you go into this, you know, then understanding of energies. So going into hibernation, going into the womb, gestating, growing, changing, transforming, and then coming out in spring and being reborn again, you know, into the springtime, into the summer.
That gestation or that quiet, that going in is not necessarily associated with dying.
No.
Death is not necessarily part of that transformation.
No, I mean, it's definitely something that can occur, but we have so much winter here that, I mean, just recently we now have a fall and a spring. But if you think of very recent, like within the last 2 decades, our growing season has expanded by 2.5 months.
That's huge.
Yeah. So when I was a kid up here in South Central area, which is more north than Tlingit, where I'm from, the season would be, you know, like 3.5 months of summer, and then you'd have 3 weeks of freeze up, winter for almost 9 months, and 3 weeks of breakup. You know, so we have so much time in the dark. We have so much time in winter that's a construct that people have to think about it differently, because Laura 48, you think of winter as being cold. It's a temporary infliction of suffering, and it'll be spring, you know, in a couple months and you'll be fine. Up here, we have to find, like, most of our time or half of our time is spent in winter. So how do you live and exist and have fun and play and be in winter?
Right.
Because we're not just, you can't just go hide in your house for 6 months.
Right.
I mean, you can, but then people get seasonal affective disorder and like it causes all sorts of problems, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm also just thinking like it also reflects the food cycles, I imagine, as well. Because what are the primary winter foods?
It depends on where you're at. So Alaska is very large.
Right.
Alaska is 20% of the United States landmass. And we have six different ecoregions. So at home, where we're at, we have Tlingit is the Tongass, what's referred to as the Tongass National Forest. It's my traditional homelands, and it is some of the most biologically dense with life ecosystems on the planet. And we have all sorts of food and medicine, and all at different times of the year. But there's definitely kind of that time of the year in the winter between like mid New Year's and spring, where there's less accessible, but there's still food accessible, but it's less accessible. And so you have to be mindful throughout the year to harvest enough food to get ready for the winter. And then you're not working as much outside in the cold, not working as much outside in situations that could be icy or dangerous, or storms on the ocean. Like you have enough food, so you're inside doing winter activities, or you're around doing trapping or different activities. And yeah, so I lost my train of thought.
Yeah,
but
you just about the different ecosystems and the way that different food patterns within those different foodways within those different ecosystems. And I'm hearing a lot of preservation from foraging and from the forest during the summer to enable like a sustainable winter.
Yeah, so our new year really is not at winter solstice. It's more spring equinox, because that's when, for us, when the herring come and the herring eggs are in. And so traditionally we put out hemlock boughs, and the herrings would spawn on the hemlock boughs, and you bring the hemlock boughs in, and then you have this just complete food that is a feast and so good for you. And it's just rejuvenation and renewal. And that's the start of our new food cycle.
So the new year is starting with a new food cycle. It's amazing to me all the different ways in which humans start the new year, the different places in the calendar where people can start the new year. Is just the sheer diversity is so encouraging and so cool.
Yeah. And that's why, a lot of ancient cultures work with winter solstice, summer solstice, spring equinox, fall equinox, right? Because those are consistent markers in the change of seasons and like you're saying, food cycles.
Well, I think we're kind of coming to, and just like wondering if there's anything else that you want to share with folks about some of your work, or some of how you've been thinking about time and healing and art.
Just it's important to find balance, right? Because we still live in a society that needs to move and function and collaborate. It's good for people to be productive. It's good for people to be useful and of service, which requires some engagement with time. And so it's like anything else, it's in moderation. And finding that balance in their life. And so that's just my ask is, get away from things that take time, to get away from things that increase cortisol and adrenaline and structure. And I'm pausing because I can see all of this, and people don't realize that their time is valuable. That's why we have the social media apps that have so much dopamine that then absorb you, because every ad you see and all the time that you spend there, other people are making money off of that. So your time and attention is your free will. Like, how do you allocate your free will? Where are you putting that time and effort and value in? So just take a good look at your life. And do you have too much structure? Do you have not enough structure? Where's your hygiene and management of your time?
Well, thank you. Those are phenomenal questions, and it's a wonderful time of year for people to be asking them and engaging with them.
Yeah.
Good timing, shall we say.
Well, thank you for having me on, kind of sheesh. And like I said, I'll send you some of those links you can put in with this. And I look forward to hearing the product of this and also your other shows.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Remembering and Reenchanting podcast. If you are enjoying what you are hearing, please subscribe, share, and leave us a review. I am always happy to hear from you, dear listener, to continue finding ways to connect the disconnected and go deeper on your own journey of remembering and reenchanting with your communities, your organizations, and your families. I invite you to check out our courses and other community offerings via the Sequoia Summit Via website. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Though I must admit I spend much more time working with really amazing people than crafting social media. If you want to work with me one-on-one or bring me to speak at your organization or family office, you can find out more at sarajolena.com.